and welcome to our 2022's First Lady Power Hour. This is our first one. It's really great that we're kicking it off with an amazing panel. If you're new here, well, our Ladies Power Hour is a show where we invite panelists to explore topics that affect our community. And we got a good one ahead of you because we are talking about the Femme Effect. You know, as thought leaders in esports and the community, we are proud to introduce this concept, and it's really a movement to bring true inclusion to tournaments and competitions, to impose new rules requiring the presence of women on the team, whether it's through coaching or a player. It's very simple to talk the talk, but it's a bit harder to walk the walk, and the Femme Effect is that movement to help with that change. Now tonight, like I said, we're talking about the Femme Effect, but specifically co-ed teams and tournaments in esports and gaming. Please help me in welcoming our amazing panel. We have Helena Malik, Director of Content at eFuse and ex-professional Call of Duty player. Welcome, Helena.
Hi, Camille. How are you?
It's nice to see you again. We also have Josh Otero, co-founder and CEO of Nutra Gamer and founder of Warrior Gamer Foundation. Welcome, Josh.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. And Celeste Anderson, Director of Business Operations at Northern Arena and ex-professional Halo player. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Thank you all for joining us today. Like I said, we're going to dive deeper into the discussion, but usually I like to kick these things off with an opportunity for you guys to tell our audience a little bit about yourself and your background and experience in the industry. So Helena, from Call of Duty professional player to director of content, that's a huge move. Can you kind of tell us a little bit of background on how that came about and how you found yourself at eFuse?
Oh, thank you so much for the amazing intro, by the way. Call of Duty was a ton of fun. I played it through high school and college on the Major League Gaming circuit. So we traveled all over and competed a little bit online as well. I played both on co-ed teams and then also played in the Female Pro League, which was an all-online female Call of Duty league, which again was a ton of fun. But I sort of was seeing my skills kind of go down and deteriorate as I got a little bit older, but also wanted to finish my degree in marketing, so kind of had a decision to make, but it was a pretty easy decision to finish my degree. And then I started working pro bono for one of the Call of Duty teams I played for, that was called Panda Gaming. And through that experience, landed a job out of college at the Cleveland Cavaliers NBA franchise. I was there for about 3.5 years, helping them start their esports franchise called Cavs Legion. And then recently found myself at eFuse roughly about a year ago after that sort of business experience and sports experience. And eFuse being locally in Ohio is just kind of a perfect fit for me to come back to my roots, as we do a lot of Call of Duty tournaments as well.
It comes full circle, and now you're dealing
Always
with
does.
all the snow that Ohio is getting right now. So I feel bad for you, but amazing journey, and I can't wait to hear more about your experiences. Josh, can you tell us a little bit about Nutra Gamer and what made you want to start that, and Warrior Gamer Foundation?
Absolutely, yeah. So Nutra Gamer is really it's a healthy alternative to the traditional energy drinks, and we really came up with the idea after working with some elite level esport athletes and seeing that in their, they're representing a certain brand. In that can, they were putting water, because they realized that by drinking these energy drinks, it was affecting their performance in a negative way. So we came up with a formula that basically is a healthy, and it was specifically designed for that cognitive athlete. So there's no added sugars, no high caffeine, no extra garbage in there that all the other drinks have. And it's just it's a drink mix. So it's very, you pour it in water, and it's super simple. And the whole idea with it is really to help improve player health and mental health, because when you're consuming unhealthy beverages, it leads to sleep problems, weight gain, all sorts of different things. So if we could start at the base and provide healthy nutrition products, starting with the drink, then that's the first step, because we're drinking all day long, right? So we might as well be drinking something healthy that's not. And created the Warrior Gamer Foundation really because I saw this need of with military and veterans with a sense of purpose. And then I was working with some gamers and just saw potentially a need for some leadership, resiliency training, coping skill training. And so I thought by pairing the two together would create this great community, because they both need each other really, and they could feed off each other. So what we do is we put together tournaments, we're going to be doing online, and that'll be basically pairing the two groups together. Currently we're doing in-person tournaments, and they're streamed. So we're doing our first big one this year will be in June at the LA Coliseum. And we're going to be doing an NBA 2K tournament, which will be co-ed. And then we're doing a Valorant military tournament, and then a Rocket League military tournament as well. And then we're also going to run some co-ed tournaments alongside that. And then we're going to run a health and wellness fair. So we really focus on mental health, physical health, and suicide prevention. So that's really, we're just trying to help the community and build these two communities so everybody is happier and better off for it. So
that's awesome. That's really awesome. As if we have more places to have those tough discussions, I feel like it's better. So I love what you're doing with Warrior Gamer.
Thank you.
Celeste, similar to Helena, you kind of went from pro to director at an esports company. You don't hear that story a lot, but apparently tonight we're hearing that a lot. Can you tell us about how you found yourself at Northern Arena and what you do there?
Yeah, for sure. It's been quite the interesting journey for like the past 15 years. So I started off same as Helena in high school. I grew up in like a really small town, so I didn't really have much to do other than to kind of sit at home and play video games. So I ended up getting very heavily involved in Halo, and that's the game I ended up trying to pursue to get better at. And it became one of those things as when I was a kid, I was really heavily into sports. So I was like competing in very odd sports already as it was. So I was competing in like 5-pin bowling, tennis, baseball, softball, all sorts of different things. And so it kind of transcended over to video games. And then I got really competitive with that. So I dedicated pretty much the next 15 years after that to being really good at the game. So started competing at different tournaments. My first major tournament was at Fan Expo, and then I got second place there. And it was kind of like a different realm of like, I don't know, this different world that I was like really interested in because I had no idea esports even existed. So I got into that very heavily. Started competing at MLG as well. So I started competing at MLG 2000. I think 7 was my earliest event. And then it just went on from every single year. So I ended up progressing to Halo 2, Halo 3, 4, right? So on and so forth up until Infinite, which is the most recent Halo. So now I'm competing, but obviously I'm not competing to the level that I used to because I am also much older. I'm in my 30s now, so I could see my decline of skills go, hey, like it's starting to digress here. So I ended up doing, like wanting to venture and start getting behind the scenes of esports. So it went into like competing and then certain opportunities just kind of presented itself. So I ended up getting into like tournament operations, and then I landed over at Northern Arena just one day because I was being interviewed about playing Halo competitively. And it just kind of bloomed from there. I ended up working on their social media at first, and then it just went into a hey, like you're really involved in esports, Northern Arena Productions here in Canada. We're wanting to build Canada and their esports ecosystem. So I said, I'm on board. Let's do this. So ever since then I've been doing that where I still compete off to the side. So I do the Halo Infinite. It is more so now female tournaments that I participate in, and we'll talk about that later, why I kind of transitioned over from doing co-ed to why I really enjoy female tournaments. But that's where it's gone now. Like we have a very great community of Halo for women, and we've kind of just supported each other because we all know that we're all super busy these days, and we all have like different lives, but we all have like the same meaning behind us. So I've been enjoying that on the side, but yeah, it's been quite the adventure. So now I am like director of business operations at Northern Arena, so I oversee all of the projects. So I do things like the Canadian Game Awards or the TELUS Esports Series, and then my other side job is that I'm the North American regional lead for Face It Halo. So I run all of the official 343 HCS events right now. So that's kind of where I am. I'm doing a little bit of everything while trying to keep hold of obviously that competitive esports tournaments to myself.
Well, I've had the pleasure of watching you compete and also working with you with Northern Arena.
Yeah.
And it's funny how the skill sets, like the skill of multitasking, I think every gamer could relate to.
Yeah.
And based on the list of things Celeste is doing right now, you can see a lot of multitasking skills that she's taking on. So I can't wait to hear all about it, especially your tournament experience and all of your experiences and how it contributes to this conversation. I see chat going, and I know everyone's really excited to watch. I just want to remind you that throughout the discussion, keep all of your thoughts, in chat, and we're going to ask you for questions at the end of them. So don't go anywhere. All right, let's get the conversation going. I think it's really hard for us to understand where we have to go with women competing in tournaments, whether it's a all women tournament or co-ed, if we don't really understand what is currently going on in the space. So Celeste, you've mentioned that you've been competing in mostly women Halo Infinite tournaments because Halo Infinite's thriving right now. So can you give us a glimpse of what your experience is now, and are you usually, or I guess not, you're not usually the only woman since you're doing all women tournaments, but have you really seen a change from when you first started to now?
Yeah, it's an interesting journey because you would think that esports has been around for so long now, right? It's been, I want to say, like early console games for sure, up in from 2005, right? Give or take, it's been at least 15 plus years. So you would think there would be a lot of progression with regarding co-ed teams and women in the gaming space on a competitive level. But if I had to be really honest regarding like the transition of like how different it is from the beginning, how it is now, um, it's gotten better. I'm not going to say that it hasn't. It definitely has because there are more women involved and more women discovering about whole esports scene, right? But how it's navigated internally is still fairly new and it's still very much so in its infancy. And I always say this is that esports is not necessarily regulated, right? There's no, it's not like the NBA. It's not like the women's NBA, right? It's a very touchy subject and it's very hard to have discussions regarding it because there is certain stigmas and stereotypes that still exist between men and women in the space that still occurs. So for me, I transitioned over to a lot to female all female tournaments, just because it's for me in the Halo community. We've all known each other for so long that it feels very safe. It feels very I don't have to be anyone different or prove myself necessarily within these tournaments. It's more about like that support level because all of us have gone through the same types of I guess journeys on how we ended up getting into competitive levels and then what we struggled to even formulate co-ed teams to this day. So there hasn't been a lot like a huge change that I've seen from obviously the early 2000s up until now. But it's you can tell though that there are steps that are being made. So for example, you have like Call of Duty tournaments or Warzone tournaments happening, and even Halo tournaments where organizers are stepping in and pushing for those co-ed tournaments, which is great. And whether they're creating like a team based off of women that are really excelling in their game, or content creators, or pro players, or male content creators, right? They're trying to combine them into the space, and you can see that happening. Like recently, I competed in a Halo tournament, and it was a co-ed tournament, right? So they gave me captain and I was able to kind of come up with the team, and it was honestly, it was a great experience, and I had forgotten that kind of headspace for a long time, what it felt like to compete with another guy, just because it's been quite a while. It's still a struggle, obviously. There are some things like both internally in myself that I have to overcome to want to be comfortable to compete with guys. But right, it's a little, there's just so many multitude of layers in it right now. So
Now, Helena, do you echo the sentiments that Celeste is saying? I know you aren't competing as much now, but you do support tournaments on the content side and you have that perspective. What are your thoughts in terms of where the state of women in esports and co-ed teams are at right now?
No, definitely. I mean, as Celeste said, like there's a long way to go, and I totally agree that we're still in its infancy. I will say that the scenes that we're in are mainly like Call of Duty and Warzone. And as eFuse, we have the privilege of running these tournaments with Activision. Getting developer approval, and it's one of Activision's like main pushes right now to make sure that these events are co-ed or women's tournaments and have inclusion, which is amazing that we actually have developer support. Like when I was competing, there were maybe 4 or 5 women in the room at a LAN total. And now the faces are completely different for Warzone and for Call of Duty. Like the names that exist now in the female side who are popular were not around when I was competing, which is a great thing that women are kind of popping out of the woodwork, if you will, and playing Warzone and playing Call of Duty. So it's really great to see. And now there's, I mean, thousands of women who compete at a high level. I'd say, a handful of them, call it 30 of them, could compete at a pro level in Warzone, which is night and day from, when I was playing. And really happy to see that. And if we even talk about the prize pools and the backing for a second, like when I was in the female pro league way back when, I mean, we were not competing for a lot of money. We were not competing for a lot of prizes, and now like EFUs, like we just ran with Activision and the Minnesota Rocker. We ran a $55,000 tournament just for women, which was massive and incredible. And we're planning on doing many more. We throw co-ed tournaments. We create IP, so we have the co-ed Cup, which we can do across multiple titles, and we have Sadie Hawkins, which was a really fun IP that the women get to ask the men, similar to like the Sadie Hawkins dances. Us boomers know, but so there's a lot more progress that's being happening, and more developer support, which is great. That wasn't there before, but to completely agree with Celeste, like there's still a lot of targeting, there's still a lot of harassment, and attitudes still need to change because these women are not going anywhere anytime soon. They're here to compete, and they're dominant.
Josh, through your organization of tournaments, are you hearing more noise around the idea of co-ed teams?
Yes, I'm starting to. I actually brought that up. So we did an all-military tournament last year. We did a Rocket League tournament in August, and it was the first ever all-branch tournament. And I noticed there was no females. It was only all-male teams, and there was one female coach. And I went up to her and I said, "Hey, why aren't you compete? What's going on?" And I think, speaking at least in the military, it's not as I think it's just starting up. So I'm hoping that with what we're doing, because we're going to push it, and I have no influence in what they're doing, but we can push it for our tournaments. And we're going to be, hosting some pretty large tournaments this year. We're doing a whole series of them. So I'm hoping with the influence that I have and me talking to some of these leaders in their different branches, we could start to see that, because there's no reason why we shouldn't be seeing that. And we're going to, really push for that in our tournaments. And then outside of the military branches, we're going to be doing obviously co-ed tournaments. That's obviously something that I believe in and that we believe in. So we're going to be supporting that and pushing that. But, I know from talking to many, female gamers, and then why they choose, like Celeste did, to be on an all female versus a co-ed is because it's hostile, it could be hostile. And so, at least with what we're doing, I want to make it so it's, we're teaching them to be respectful and to not do that through through our mental health and through our confidence training. Because obviously confidence, if you're a confident gamer, especially as a boy, you're probably going to be less likely to bully than you are as if you're not confident, or if you feel this girl's going to beat you and you're the boy and you're like, you start, calling names. So if we could teach them to be stronger physically and mentally, I feel that that's going to be a big advantage for them to not bully versus, the other kids that are not confident and they're, the girls kicking their butt. Well, then they start calling them names and all that kind of stuff. So I think by doing the training that we're doing and then trying to push it in the tournaments that we're doing, I think we're going to be able to make, some, just, small progress, but for us, it'll be a big progress, and start seeing some of these co-ed teams come and compete will be super exciting for us. So that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah. And, from what everyone is saying, it seems like, and especially from Helena and Celeste, their experience, and Celeste, I know that you were talking about how you prefer women's only tournaments. I'm wondering, with the talk around co-ed tournaments, I feel like this isn't a new talk. We've, from the early days of competition,
Mhm.
it's always been an idea that, you know, gamers, they don't have the, like, the physicality isn't something to take into consideration. So there should be
Mhm.
co-ed teams, but I feel like we're still in this weird place of just talking about it rather than happening. So why do you think that we're still in the state of progression needing to be made rather than it's actually progressing on the side of co-ed teams? Is it because we're still focused on creating these women tournaments and women only spaces?
Um, See, not necessarily. Like I said, there's like multitude of layers regarding this whole situation that makes it a little bit difficult. And um, like to go on your point, it's just the reason why I don't see a lot of progression, because a lot of it is internal and managing attitudes and educating about how to be respectful in this space, right? You're not necessarily, it's like being in high school, right? So it's kind of those things you jump into, you don't really know how to navigate it socially. The population itself within gaming and esports, obviously it is extremely male dominated, so to have a female come in, it's easier to highlight that girl and really hone in on her skills and really focus, like, can she really keep up with the boys, might be that mentality that might occur. But we don't really know, right? And the one thing, at least that I can talk from my own personal experience, and why it's very difficult sometimes to want to feel like to get away from doing all female tournaments, which I still believe it's still a great space to feel safe and just hang out with the girls type of thing. But like, if I wanted to break out again into doing co-ed tournaments and teaming up with guys, there's a lot of internal battles, especially like for my side as just a female growing up. So the way I kind of like talk about it is that um, women, like in like high school in our teen years, we're having a lot of social pressures as women, because we're raised very differently probably from men on just how we're supposed to behave and how we're supposed to have an attitude and how to be polite. And a lot of it now, obviously we didn't have this back in early 2000s, but like I can't even imagine what it's like now. But like there's a lot of pressure even just on social media and how the internet is and how accessible things are, is that I don't ever think that there is a moment that a girl is immediately hopping onto the internet and comparing herself to other people. Whether she compares her skills to another female, whether it's comparing it to another male, there's like this overwhelming feeling of, am I good enough to compete? Am I good enough to have value? Because a lot of us girls growing up, like it's easy to just hop on Instagram and kind of like look at another girl and like compare yourself, right? So I don't ever expect like anything, like as women growing up, we can be like very insecure or having a struggle of like, what is our value? And now you put me up into a spotlight of esports where I have to prove myself even more and create more value, and I'm getting that sort of value not only through myself, but like, I have to bring into a space, if I want to compete on a team, I have to prove my value to them. And that's where it's just like, to have a female come into that space, I don't doubt that a woman doesn't know necessarily of the mindset how to navigate this whole social aspect of it and put themselves to set up with the attitude and like what Josh is saying, like to teach like how to be strong in this, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
it's easy for a girl to hop onto a team, and then if I don't perform the way I did, it can be easily I can be easily singled out that I didn't keep up or I was not good enough. And the girl brings that back and compares, like, the whole value system of yourself as a player, as who you are, and like, right, you're trying to break out into this space, but like it just becomes super overwhelming. So I don't doubt like this whole kind of space in itself is so intense for a girl, and why a male that might not understand a female's perspective coming in, it could be just an honest like miscommunication, because these conversations don't happen. i
Yeah.
don't i don't go into a guy's team being like, hey, like I have a lot to prove, and I know that you probably think like I can't keep up because this is a male dominated sport, right? You're all familiar with the way you guys think, and like, and you guys are comfortable with each other because you guys behave a certain way, and like you guys have expectations of like of each other. But like the expectation of a female coming in has to be like really,
tenfold.
yeah, it's tenfold of like my expectations. So even though I can beat guys in tournaments and even though I can prove myself, I have to kind of even step it up even further to be highlighted. And that's where like these co-ed tournaments need to be not just like happening, but they need to be monitored and educated. And that's what like on Josh's part, like he's doing a great job. If that is what his goal is, obviously, just to educate and like teach how to be strong and like get the right mentality and attitude, then I don't doubt like this can progress much better if the conversation just starts happening between males and females within esports.
Helena, what are your thoughts on that? The conversation between women and men really is what that hurdle is for progression in this space.
Absolutely. There needs to be an educational component to this. There needs to be an education piece because I don't think people quite understand the problem. And if you don't understand the problem, then how do you fix the problem? And so, people and males, they would ask me, why wouldn't you have your mic on in a public game lobby? Why not this? Why not that? And they've kind of never stepped foot in those shoes, so they wouldn't really understand. I'm glad that they're asking those questions, but sometimes they're like, well, this is seemed as forced diversity, where these girls don't deserve to be here, or why can't you, it might be a little bit of name calling. Okay, well, like harassment and like targeting, it's not name calling. It goes a lot like deeper than this. Like there's DDoSing, there's swatting, like that, like it's insane the kind of harassment that can happen. And if you've never experienced that, because why would you if you're a man, then you really wouldn't understand. So I definitely agree there needs to have some kind of an educational component to all of these things and start helping men and women kind of talk and have that conversation. So I love all of Celeste's points, and I'm even learning from being here and being on this panel.
Josh, Celeste mentioned that that conversation, and Helena's agreeing that's the key to really make that progress. What is your response you're hearing from teams when you're organizing tournaments on the idea of co-eds, when you're having those tough conversations, like going up to a coach and be like, hey, where's like the women on this team?
I mean, honestly, I think a lot of them are like, oh yeah, we've been talking about it or it's in discussion, but then sometimes you don't see anything. So then it's like, okay, is this just talk or is there action happening? So I've been, and that's why I'm trying to like require it for certain tournaments that we're doing and things like that, because otherwise it becomes a lot of talk. So I think, it's important that these coaches follow through and allow, actually put together co-ed teams. But like to Celeste's point, that's upsetting for me to hear. Like, she doesn't want to go to co-ed because of that. It's like, then we need to even fix co-ed to make it so then when you're playing, guys and girls, the guys are respectful to the girls and vice versa. And then it's, everything's safe, because they're obviously the only reason why you're going to go to an all-female team is because it's a safe space. Mm-hmm. And if we could make it, safe space in a co-ed team, then everything is just going to be co-ed because it's easier and, that's the way it'll be. But until that gets fixed, and I guess that comes on with the training and, training the leadership, the confidence, all that kind of stuff. So, but so from our standpoint, we're trying to push it. There's companies like eFuse that are really on the cutting edge of this, and teams like, version 1 and Gen G that I see are doing it already, but it's still not, probably where it needs to be. And I think there's still a lot of work that has to be done, but I think by us starting, because I don't think it started until recently, at least from what you guys are all way longer in this industry than I am, but I'm coming out in 3 years as an outsider coming in, but I've really got to learn a lot about the industry, and so I'm starting to see this trend, but it's it's relatively recent. So hopefully that continues, and then we're going to do everything we can to continue to push it and kind of nudge coaches and teams to put them on when they're at least competing with us. They're going to do what they're going to do with outside of us, but maybe our events will get even bigger where it's going to be like a huge thing, and they're going to want to have teams like that. So yeah, that's our goal, is to make it so they want to have co-ed teams and it benefits everybody. and they're safe, not just co-ed teams, but they're safe.
Yeah, that's very important. You know, Celeste, Helena mentioned the idea of co-ed teams potentially being seen as forced diversity.
Mhm.
So, what do you think are some common barriers co-ed teams face when competing?
Yeah, so if you're talking from the perspective of like internally, like the co-ed team being formed and how it is within that dynamic, a lot of the barriers obviously is one that we talked about is the communication between the different genders, right? And how to communicate different feelings regarding this type of dynamic of the team, because there's a lot of things when it comes to co-ed tournaments that are kind of assumed. So again, like there's a whole everyone's looking at that team, right? And even the guys may feel it because I've had it where actually I've teamed with some guys, and they said like they would get comments from other guys messaging them being like, why are you teaming with her? And it becomes a barrier for those guys to say like, did I make the right choice? Did I make the right choice to bring this girl on and have faith in it? Because I'm not gonna say like I've never gotten that opportunity. I've teamed with like many co-ed teams, and the guys were phenomenal with giving me an opportunity and then blocking out that type of conversation from other guys and that judgment. But you can see that barrier still happens, and again, it becomes like this very interesting dynamic internally where the guys are confused if like, okay, like I'm being judged now for for teaming with a girl, and then the girl coming on being like, well, I'm being judged like that, maybe I don't deserve to be on this team, or can I keep up with this team? And so like that's a lot of like the internal battles of the barriers, I guess, in that sense of um, getting that going and not bringing it within the game. And when it comes to the game itself, obviously, on my own personal experience, obviously, is that barrier exists, and that now has been kind of planted in my head. And then if I start to see that within a game, I'm not performing to the way I want to, or maybe I have a really bad game that I'm not really happy with, I tend to get performance anxiety, and I start to be extremely critical in mid game because I know like being watched by other males. I know my male teammates might have expectations on me, and I know people that are like watching our team to see how well we do. They're keeping a close eye, and the conversations I know are happening on the back end, and that's where the barriers come in. It's the mindset that you end up getting into both on the male and female side within that team. It's a very, like I said, it's very interesting dynamic, but you come across like some really great guys that just don't care, and like that's the type of attitude we need to teach to these guys, because that allows me to have more confidence and me to feel like an equal and me to not feel like I have to prove anything. I could just be me as the player. Then anxiety goes away, and like that insecurity goes away, and it becomes such a powerful process. Like the first time it ever like showcased that it did so well was back, I think, in 2008 or 2009. There was a co-ed team, and it was two girls, two guys, and that they broke into pro bracket on Halo in Halo 2, and everyone's perspective just went like this. It went bigger finally. And it, because they couldn't say like, right, and the fact that it was two girls, two guys, there was no numbers against like, oh, it's just one female, she got carried by the guys type of attitude, which you can hear sometimes, right? It was like this whole different mentality, and people started to have conversations being like, yo, like these girls are good, and that's the type of situations we kind of need to create. But again, like it's a big barrier obviously when you want to get these teams to come together, and then for them to battle all those conversations that might be happening inside or like outside that might affect them. So
Yeah. So Helena, from Celeste gave us a little bit of the player and being a member of those teams perspective. With you working with developers and working with teams in the past on the back end, and obviously participating as well, and with organizations, what do you think the hurdles are for like the organization side to kind of invest in creating a co-ed team?
Definitely. I think there's not enough co-ed events yet. And there will be, there should be. But for them to really like invest in these co-ed teams, there needs to be the tournaments and the leagues that they could compete in. So there needs to be sort of like a long-term co-ed competition structure, whether that be like a league or a series of tournaments that are more long-term, where you can actually feel comfortable as an organization signing those contracts and having it feel good as a business decision. I think just more is needed. I think like a league structure would be really awesome where, you know, call it, there'd be like a season, like a regular season and a playoffs and a championships. But in that regular season would be awesome if there would be, bare minimum, a couple of co-ed events scattered in there, so that these women could long term compete with these guys, you know, get that sort of like mentorship from a coach, you know, on a long term scale, like a full season or two, instead of even these like one off co-ed events that are like for the day or for the hour for the 2 hours. So I think there just needs to be more like focus on a long term structure, in terms of a barrier.
Yeah, definitely. And it's just mind blowing to me because I feel like we often see women, whether they're hosting or now we're seeing more women as analysts and casters. But it's, Josh, on the space of competitive side, that's usually where we're not seeing women in tournaments invest their time in advocating for that. So why do you think that is?
I think it's a little bit about like what Helena and Celeste have been talking about. I don't think it's been on the forefront. I don't think it's been a priority. So I think, I hope that tournament organizers are starting to realize this and will make it a priority, because I think it hasn't been a priority, or they've been scared, or they wouldn't know how it was going to, unfold. So they just haven't done it, which obviously that's not a reason, right? So if we could start having these tournament organizers put on co-ed events and encouraging behavior, and then having these leaders like Celeste was saying, when she had the 2-2 and the two guys were leaders, so everybody else kind of elevated to them. So if we could get these leaders that come out and really support this in the gaming space, and then the tournament organizers kind of rally around that, I think it's a win-win, and it'll build the industry itself. So it's actually going to help the tournament organizers as well. So, and obviously that's what we're trying to do. And maybe we could be an influence and have success and do all that kind of stuff to really help it. But I think by having leaders, strong male leaders in that space, that's going to help elevate. And then having tournament organizers that are committed to building co-ed events will change it. And obviously it's going to take time. It's not like they're going to snap their fingers and next month, oh, everybody's perfect and no boys are bullies. And I mean, because I know how guys talk to each other, and it's not always the nicest. So they have to learn, etiquette and how to talk to each other, but it's not impossible. It just takes time, but if they have to start it, and that's the biggest thing, is starting. Yeah. So hopefully this is the year that it starts. So at least with us, it will.
Yeah, the key is they have to be open to having that conversation and listening as well. And Celeste, I want to actually break some myths, because I think there's a lot of myths or what you see online, people saying why there can't be co-ed teams. They would have to live in a house together. Like, how would that work if you have a co-ed team? Celeste, what are some common misconceptions that you've heard about co-ed teams that you want to debunk based on your experience and what you see?
A lot of misconceptions that I feel like is that a co-ed team normally doesn't like last, or they won't get along long term. Which is why Helena's point on like creating like a league or an ecosystem of a long-term basis should be like this, not just one-off like co-ed tournament, allows that ecosystem to kind of have those people learn and educate each other and create that better dynamic. Because yeah, like I mean, like, right, it's a very interesting concept, because as like a female, like being on a male team, I already know that there's things like gender wise, like we think different. There's certain things that I as a woman, like I need, right, like versus a guy, like both like emotionally and like right physically, and like to have those conversations a little bit off. So like there's already like that division. But the misconception, like that I feel, is just that like there's just not enough support backing on a team like that, because it's just not long term enough. Like they just maybe might not see like it's consistent enough for a girl and a guy team to stick with the same roster, in a certain tournament for like a year, and I get that, right? Like, but it's possible. It's just we need to do it in a better way, whether it's to create like a co-ed tournament or a league that exists to create that ecosystem and build up relationships between a male and a female in esports.
Mm-hmm. Helena, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I just say misconceptions, like, oh, the guy's only doing this to date the girl. He's only couldn't possibly be teaming with her because she's good. The guy's only teaming with her to get money from an org. Like, there's so many different like
Mm-hmm.
BS kind of like misconceptions and excuses, and none of them are true. And I love to use Smixy as an example. Like, she signed with the Minnesota Rocker as a Warzone player, and she's absolutely crushing it. She has so much money in earnings. She's also obviously a fabulous person and a fabulous streamer, but just most importantly, she dominates. She competes in these tournaments that are designed for men and applies to them, and competes and wins. So it's really incredible, and she's really leading the way. But I'd say all of those misconceptions are just they're BS. Camille, they're BS.
It's BS. It's BS. I love it. Breaking the myth right here. Josh, let's add the benefits that orgs will have if they actually push for co-ed teams. So what are some of the things that you think would appeal to tournament organizers in them supporting co-ed teams for the good of the future of esports? Although I would love that to be just the reason, but we know this is also a business.
Well, and that's so my first point is revenue. They're all worried about revenue and generating enough revenue. So I think by supporting that, they're going to increase their revenue because they're going to open their audience. They're going to have more diverse audience, which means they're going to have more people, and that's more money. So I think first and probably foremost above everything, because they are looking to generate revenue, is revenue. And by creating co-ed teams and co-ed tournaments, it's going to generate more revenue than the all male will. So I think that's the first and foremost. Second, what it's going to do is, it'll expand their audience, and it'll also improve teamwork and camaraderie, because as their teams are working together, it's going to help build the cohesiveness with the co-ed teams. So I think from a long-term standpoint, building these relationships, it's going to build leadership. It's going to build, confidence, because if the team is working together as a team, they're going to be more confident individuals because there's no infighting, and then they're going to be winning. So I think it'll overall help with confidence as well, and then participation.
Yeah, definitely. It just makes me so hopeful that just orgs are watching and paying attention to the revenue side of things, because I think that is so a common misconception that it doesn't make money, but there's so much more money to be made with co-ed teams. So to end off our discussion here, because I know chat wants to kind of chime in with their questions, I'm going to ask you all, who's accountable? We talked about putting co-ed teams to action and making more of a space for women to feel comfortable to play on co-ed teams. Is this the accountability of, yes, players, publishers, tournament organizers? Who is accountable? Helena?
This is like the cheesiest answer of everything, but it's all of us, and
Everyone.
like everyone. I know.
Everyone.
Oh God! But if we go down the list, like, it really does. So it lands on eFuse, for providing these opportunities. It lands on Activision and 343. It lands on men for listening, and thank you, Josh, for being a part of this. This is awesome to have you here. It lands on teams like V1. I mean, and you could go down the list, but it really is a cheesy answer, but it's everybody, in my opinion.
It's true, though. No, it is
Yeah.
true. It relies on everyone to kind of hone in on their own part that they have to contribute to this movement, right? So I would say like a lot rides on like people that obviously have the power or like movement ability to create like really big like statements, like creating like the leagues, right, instead of like a one-off tournament, right, because we can preach for it, but really it's going to be ultimately to that org. But then also internally with co-eds, that's really all on us. It's the conversation that we all need to start having. Women have to be okay to have these conversations with men, being like, hey, like, this is how I feel, and then the men have to be like, hey, this is how I feel. So it really is like everyone is accountable on that side.
And yeah, obviously it's everyone, but I would think, for me, it's like me. If I'm hosting tournaments, it's my responsibility to be hosting co-ed tournaments. If, with NutriGamer, are we working together as a team, or are we just doing male dominated stuff? So I think from a business owner standpoint, and from somebody who's, runs a foundation and has tournaments, it's on me and it's my responsibility. So if I'm not doing it, then it's shame on me. So it's everybody, but then it comes down to the individual and like the business owner that's actually running everything. And in that case, it's me. So I'm responsible for promoting this and for putting that together. So I take, full accountability and responsibility for it.
Well, like the lady said, it's everyone, right? Everyone's accountable. And Josh, just being here and having the discussion, like Helena said, like, thank you for that. And all of you,
I really enjoyed it.
All of you had like really great insights, and the discussion is going to keep going. We're just going to take a little break to allow you at home to input your questions in chat. And meanwhile, we're going to check in with this Femme moment from our co-founder, Suzanne.
Hi, my name is Suzanne, a proud member of the Femme Army and the co-founder of Femme Gaming. I hope you're enjoying today's Ladies Power Hour because it's on a subject that is near and dear and passionate to me, and that's the concept of co-ed teams. I'm a competitor. I grew up playing sports. I grew up playing sports with boys. I grew up having no choice but to up my game because the only ones playing were boys. And that gave me a competitive edge. We believe at Femme Gaming every woman deserves the opportunity to have the earning power that men have, to show up with big deals and media deals and sponsorships that men have, and that, frankly, that we get to play in an environment that's safe and supportive and encouraging of our skills. And that, in effect, is what the Femme Effect is all about. It's about convincing tournaments and directors and people beyond the controller to change the game. We hope that you'll join us. We hope that you'll jump in on this movement. We hope that, similar to a 7-a-side soccer game that requires 2 women on the field at the whole time, whether men like it or not, but in order to win the championship, it has to be done that way. We hope that you'll encourage this effect within a tournament that you're a part of, a tournament that you control, the organizations you work for. This isn't just a concept, this is a movement to invite the competitor within all of us to show up on the field of play or on the screen.
Thank you, Suzanne, for that. It's always great when we hear from one of the women that helped bring this together. And we're going to let everyone get their questions in chat. I also see them coming in. But first, I want to ask everyone, well, actually, Helena, this question's for you. You may not know this, but Suzanne actually has a sports background. So this is kind of where this question's inspired. We often look at traditional sports to what we should be doing in esports. And when I say we, I mean the people with the money, the organizations. And one of the things is that idea of different leagues for women and men. We're talking co-ed, and one of the solutions that we've talked about here is the idea of implementing a league for co-ed teams. Do you feel that there should also be a league for women teams, or do you think that kind of hurts the idea of women being on the same competitive level as men?
I have mixed feelings about this. I think that they can absolutely exist, but shouldn't exist in replacement, for women to be in that league over the co-ed league. I think they could absolutely exist. All women's tournaments are so much fun. I loved competing in them. I loved some of my best friends, through gaming I've met through all women's tournaments and things of that nature. But I don't think it's a replacement for top competitive play, in my opinion. And I think that it's great to have fun. It's great to compete for those prize pools. It's great to meet friends. It's great to have a safe space. But I don't think it's exactly a replacement for a league. And I don't think that's sort of like the future of esports. I think the future of esports is co-ed leagues.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like it's a multi-layer where you have the women's league, so it could build that confidence for players that are coming in, like Celeste was saying, and then you also have that co-ed aspect. I'm gonna get to a question here in chat. This is coming from Jessica Park, which is funny. Do you have any advice for open tournaments encouraging mixed teams to participate without the requirement for at least one female / non-binary player? I don't know who wants to take this, Helena.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. I think you invite the captains who are non-binary or female, and that's sort of like sort of kind of forces the hand without forcing the hand, but having them at least chosen to pick whoever they want on their team kind of forces that a little bit more, forces these guys to sort of compete for the ladies' attention, right? Like all these guys are going to want to get picked up on these teams to compete for these prize pools. So having those women be captains is something that's worked for us at eFuse.
Celeste?
Yeah, I totally agree with Helena. Like, I feel that that's a great opportunity for that. So, I mean, to give it to the female to be like inviting to be the captain. That way, it's kind of like, there's more leeway to like choose and have an opportunity to create those experiences and like dynamic of the male and the female. I think that's just the way to do it. Yeah.
And also just like developing those relationships with like the non-binary, people and females that are
Yeah.
participating and wanting to participate in your tournaments, right? So even if they don't get chosen for your events, how can you still get them involved on the back end? How can you still keep them in your community? So it's like even if you have male captains and they end up not picking these girls, how can you still involve people? Is something to think about.
Josh, do you have anything to add?
No, I mean, I always go back to like the leadership and the confidence, right? Having them as captains pushes them as leaders, and then comes respect. So that would be my only input is, having them as captains and they're leaders, and then they earn, they should earn respect if they want to win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Okay, we have another question here. Do you think impacting youth boys to be more accepting of girls in esports will change this for the future generations? I see like everyone's
unequivocally yes.
Yeah.
that was like the perfect like softball question. You know what I mean? So no, absolutely. And to be honest, I even see like the Gen Z guys already having a slightly better attitudes than like millennial guys even. And I'm sure that it'll keep being more progressive as they get younger. But I don't know if you've seen anything, Josh, in the younger guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's when they're starting at a younger age and they're doing it together, then it's just normal, right? I had my girls playing like my girls were, I have two girls, so we were doing stuff, together with boys and boys stuff, boys stuff, and it's normal. So I think by just doing it as a normal activity, we're just playing together. It's a guy and a girl, it's not a big deal. So the more we make it as not a big deal, because right now it's like, oh, there's a girl, so I think the more we can make it just like, together, we're together. We're on the same team. We're a team. Doesn't matter if you're a guy and I'm a girl, whatever, it's a team.
The earlier you can educate people, the better. Just how it is with anything before they start, hearing it from everywhere else, right? You get taught as a kid to by your parents and like you said, just bringing them into the boy stuff, right? Like I was the exact same way when I was a kid. Like I was 5 years old playing softball, and I was like hardcore into sports, and I became that like tomboy, right? So and it became to a point where in high school I was like, I don't care, like I enjoy this a lot, and it became a mentality, right? Like where the earlier you educate them, the earlier you get into these experiences and opportunities to really learn about it, that's the best time to do it.
Yeah, I agree. And it really does. It shows how just casual gaming plays into the competitive scene, right? Because if you have kids that are playing younger and, these publishers and developers that are taking harassment and toxicity in games very seriously, it kind of helps wash away that culture, right? And make that progression so it's just accepted to have a woman with their mic on and not have to face any harassment. We have another question here from Jessica Park. I want to say Jessica Park. So, as well as any advice for encouraging female/non-binary players to compete in grassroots tournaments to give them an introduction to the landscape and provide pathways to mixed and co-ed competitions.
I'll just speak for like what the way I kind of got into it and that kind of stuff is I started going to local lands and I encourage like local lands as like one of like the top things of like really getting yourself an introduction to like this entire competitive esports and have the opportunity to actually be with like them in the same space. I know it's a little bit harder in COVID obviously, but that's kind of where I started off with. I was like 14 years old and I went to my first LAN and it became like this social thing where you just get along with everyone and then they kind of don't have that purpose of judging you online and just judging like you as a person based off of how you talk online but like in person like that human interaction. And so I found co-ed like teams being able to be created pretty easily when I started going to local LAN tournaments and started participating in something smaller. You don't have to go like full on like I'm gonna go compete at like MLG type of thing, right? And see what's gonna happen here. It's more like you can always just start small and it builds up from there. You build up a sort of confidence and comfortability to these types of experiences. So. Mm-hmm.
That's a great point. That's kind of where I got my. It's funny. We're the same person, Celeste.
We are.
We gotta hang out after this. What are we doing?
Yeah.
I had this little like land center in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania that I went to all the time, like after school and everything. I was lucky enough to have it right sort of in my backyard almost. And so I would compete in their Call of Duty tournaments for God, like $100. For a $20 entry fee, call it. So it's very low stakes at the time, but for me, it was high stakes. Like that was my local thing. That's where we all hung out and played Call of Duty, and I would go there all the time, and it was super natural. Eventually, like making all of those friends there at that LAN center, and those are actually who I teamed on the MLG circuit with. Like we took the best people from the local LAN and then started traveling a little bit more regionally. So we just drove across Pennsylvania to Ohio, like the swift 2 hours, and went to MLG Columbus. And that's kind of how it started was Lance, and yeah, it's definitely easier said than done in a COVID world. But if you're in the Ohio or Pennsylvania area, I have lots of recommendations.
Josh, do you have any advice there?
I mean, they both said it pretty good, but I mean, I would agree with Celeste. I mean, with both of them, but Celeste in person. But like, they both, Helena said too, that COVID is kind of, although hopefully it's, finishing up soon, but the in-person, because it's harder to bully when you're online, you could do whatever and, this, but when you're face-to-face, you're not going to have the same attitude. So I think that
you're going to get kicked out of the LAN center if anything happens in person.
So yeah, so I think the in-person is the start at the grassroots level.
And I think also just like, we talk about competing amongst your or playing with your friends, but maybe just setting up like a tournament and getting used to a bracket and like going through the competitive side of learning like how that looks from organizing a tournament. I think usually in those spaces, when I've interacted with different communities, that's usually how they get started and then they go into competitive play. But there's so many ways I feel like everyone could get involved, and we could have probably continued this conversation to go even longer, but unfortunately we are out of time. So we're all just going to have to hang out later, apparently, and update chat on all of our discussions. But
maybe not in Cleveland, though.
Maybe no, not with the snow. Not with the snow. But thank you all for joining us today. It's been amazing to have all three of your insights, very different perspectives, some very similar and overlapping, but different experiences. And it's been very eye-opening.
Oh, thank you so much, Camille, and thank you, Femme Gaming.
Yes, thank you, Femme Gaming, for this. Yeah, this was a great opportunity to have this conversation, and I think all of us are gonna walk away even just learning from one another of some of the stuff of our own personal experiences and what our responsibilities are in each of our ends, right, to get this movement going. So it's been awesome.
Happy to be a part of it.
Thank you all. Thank you all. And thank everyone at home for watching. As you could tell, the Femme Effect conversation is probably going to keep going because it is a hot one. And really, I hope this discussion opened up your eyes and opened up your hearts to just having this conversation and taking it into action. You know, it can be a bit scary making those first moves, but the reason we are here and the reason why the Femme Effect exists, it's about that movement to rewrite the code and ensure that women have a place in esports on all levels. And if you agree and are ready for that change, please check out a blog post that we put on our website as well as our social platforms. Hit us up with the hashtag FemEffect if you're joining the movement, and tag your favorite tournament organizers to let them know that you want to see more co-ed teams on the mainstream of their Twitch channels. Thank you all once again for watching, and we will see you next time for our next Ladies Power Hour.